Okay, welcome to this knit stocking embroidery ornament tutorial. Let's go over all the materials that you should have in your kit. You have 2 layers of cotton linen fabric in a light peachy pink, and then this is going to be our backing fabric. We also have 5 DMC threads. We're going to have 816, 520, the white blanc 543, and 3773. You're going to have a size 5 DMC embroidery needle and then a small beading needle with a little tiny eye. You're going to have some rope. This is for the backing part of the ornament. Some dark green chiffon ribbon, a 3-inch hoop, and then the stick and stitch pattern. If you're doing the pattern from home, you purchase the PDF pattern. You can either do stick and stitch for for transferring your pattern, or you can print it out and we can go over how to trace it as well. I'll go over how to transfer the pattern both ways in the video, but the kit only comes with stick and stitch, so we'll start there. All right, so to start, you're going to separate the inner ring from the outer ring of the hoop here by loosening the screw. And then you're going to lay that inner ring down on a hard, flat surface. Then you're going to want to lay your 2 layers of light pink fabric down centered over that inner ring. I like to use 2 layers of fabric just because it helps keep the fabric more taut in the hoop, which will help with your stitching. Then take the outer ring and press it down around the inner ring, sandwiching that fabric in there. And you're going to begin to tighten up the screw as much as you possibly can. We want this to be tight, tight, tight. You can also go around once you have the screw nice and tight and pull the edges of the fabric so that no little lines are in there. If it sounds like a drum, then you know that you're ready to stitch. I like to go around with a pair of scissors and just cut off some of that excess fabric, mostly just by the corners. You still want to leave 3/4 of an inch to an inch of fabric on each side for when we back the hoop, but sometimes you can just kind of get rid of a little bit of that excess so you're not accidentally trying to stitch through it as you're working. Then you're going to take your pattern and peel it away from the backing and then stick it down centered into your hoop. So I'm just going to place this. You can angle it a little bit if you want it angled. I'm going to do mine just a teensy bit angled, just like that. Press it down and we're ready to stitch. All right, so if you are tracing to transfer, you did the PDF pattern version. I'm going to quickly show you how to transfer the pattern. I'm starting by getting just 1 layer of my cotton linen fabric into the hoop here and making sure it's nice and tight all the way around. And then I have the printout of my pattern and a Pilot friction heat erasable pen. And then you're also going to need a light source. This is a light box from Amazon. They're inexpensive and they are such a great thing to have if you like to transfer your patterns for embroidery. But you can also tape your pattern up to a window and use the light, or even iPads usually have light box apps that you can get to. So you're going to put your pattern down on your light source. You can tape it into place so that it doesn't move. And then you're going to turn on my light box here. There we go. Now I'm going to turn my hoop over so that it's going to lay flat against the pattern like so. Now you're just going to trace the pattern, every little line with your pen. I like to do short, back and forth little pen strokes here to get a nice transfer of the image. This fabric is a little bit textured, so helps to just do shorter little back and forth motions. Once you get all that traced, then I'll show you what to do next. All right, all you need to do now is unscrew this, and then I like to use 2 layers of fabric just to get it more taut. So I'm just going to put it back into the hoop the correct way and add that 2nd layer of fabric in. So I'll lay this down, lay the untraced on one first, then lay this one on top, and then I'm going to rehoop this. And I'll just tighten the screw up at the top again, and ready to stitch. Okay, let's get started with stitching. You're going to start by separating out 4 strands of 8/16. So all of our threads are made up of 6 strands, so I separated this into 4 and 2. And I'm going to get those 4 through the eye of my needle here. Sometimes it helps to wet the end. Then get it through there and tie a knot at the opposite end. Cut off any excess, and we're going to start with this line right here and this line right here, and we're going to be doing a whipped candy cane back stitch. So you're just going to come up through the fabric and go down about a stitch length away, come back up through the fabric a short stitch length away, and then go back down through that same hole from the previous stitch and pull. Come back up a stitch length away, go back down through the same hole from the end of the previous stitch. Repeat that all the way across, and I also want you to do that for this one up here as well. Next, you're going to separate out 4 strands of your bright white thread, and we're going to do the whipped back stitch part. So I'm just going to get that through my needle, tie off a knot at the other end, and I'm going to show you how to do whipped back stitch. So you can start on any side here of these lines. Sorry, we're blurry. Okay, so you're going to come up through the fabric at the end of one of the lines, pull all the way up, and then you're going to push your needle underneath that first red stitch that we made. It helps if you take your non-stitching hand and sort of push up underneath the fabric right underneath that stitch so that you can angle your needle up and out to move it through that stitch so it doesn't get snagged on the stick and stitch paper. And then you're going to pull that through in the direction of the line. Then you're going to come back down to the bottom of the line again, and you're going to push your needle underneath the next stitch. And then pull it through. Come back down to the bottom of the line again, push it underneath the next stitch, and pull it through. It does not matter if you're starting from the bottom or the top of the line every time, but just keep it consistent. Once you get all the way to the end, you're just going to make a down stitch right at the end of the line. Go ahead and repeat that for this line as well. Okay, so I forgot to film this, I'm so sorry, but for the little strings coming off the side of the stocking here, you're going to still do whipped back stitch, but you're just going to switch to 2 strands of each. So you're going to use 2 strands of the red 8/16 and 2 strands of the white blanc to do whipped back stitch on each of those 4 little strings coming off the side of the stocking right there. Okay, next step. I think when I did the materials video, I forgot to mention that we are going to actually use a size 22 chenille needle in this project. So that's the needle I want you to use now, because we're going to use all 6 strands of 520. So just keep all 6 strands together, and this needle has the larger eye, so it should be a bit easier to get all 6 strands through there. Then just tie off your knot in the end like normal. Okay, we're going to back stitch in this little section and this little section right here. And on both of these, I like to start on the like the longest interior part. So I'm going to start right here. And I'm going to do back stitch, but I want to keep my stitch lengths really, really tiny because we're using back stitch as a filler stitch here. Sorry, I don't know why that keeps getting a little bit blurry on me. So just make a little straight stitch out and go all the way across with backstitch. Then you're going to make your way back with more backstitch just right next to there. They can line up, like your stitches can line up right next to each other, or they can be slightly offset. It doesn't really matter. But basically all you're doing is you're going back and forth until we get this whole space filled in with backstitch. I am not going to worry about lining my stitches up perfectly every time. So some of them might be a little bit offset from each other, and that's totally fine. So I'll make it all the way to the end here. And then I'm going to go back across this way again, right underneath. So just continue to fill, so you'll go here, 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 and as you get to the end here, you'll just make a few little stitches to fill in that little remaining space that we have. Then you're going to do the same thing for this section. So start with this line right here with your back stitch, and then work your way back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until you have maybe just a couple of little stitches to fill in to get that space. Okay, we're going to do a little bit of satin stitch next. We just have a little bit to do in this pattern. You're going to use 3 strands of 3773, and we're going to vertically satin stitch in this section right here and this section right here. So when I'm doing this, I like to come up every time from the opposite side of the candy cane stitching that we already did. So you're going to come up through the fabric and you're going to make a down stitch directly opposite where you came up through the fabric. So you're essentially making a straight stitch here. Then you're going to come back up through the fabric right next to that first stitch that you made, right next to it. And you're going to go back down directly opposite that, right next to your previous down stitch. So here's my previous down stitch, and I'm just going to move this over to here. And I'm going to pull. And I'm going to continue like that all the way across. By just moving my needle over ever so slightly each time and putting it down directly opposite where I came up through the fabric. If you really don't like satin stitch, you could do a split stitch here, or you could even do more back stitch to fill in this area. This would be like some other options that we have, but I do like the kind of differences in texture that we have going on in this stocking. I wanted it to be a whole bunch of different textures. So I'm going to stick with satin stitch, and I'm going to get this section done, and then you'll also do this section right here. So on this one down here, you want to work slightly at a little bit of a diagonal. So kind of like if you think about starting somewhere in the middle, you can kind of pull a stitch right here and then fill in on either side of that. So I would kind of work like this. And then I would work on this side of that first stitch that I made and fill in over here as well, if that makes sense. So when you get to this section, go ahead and pull one straight stitch right down the middle here, and then fill in everything on this side, and then fill everything on this side. Okay, next up we're going to do some chain stitch, a very fun stitch. You're going to use 3 strands of 543, And we're gonna be chain stitching in this little middle section. So I'm gonna start up here at the top, right underneath where my satin stitch ended. You're gonna come up through the fabric and you're going to make a down stitch through that very same hole that you just came up through. And you're gonna begin to pull, but you're gonna leave a little loop out like this. Move that away from the light for you. Okay, so leave a little loop out like this, and you're gonna come up a stitch length away on the inside of that loop. Keep your stitch lengths pretty short here because we want this to be a nice tight chain. So I'm coming up a stitch length away on the inside of this loop, and then I'm gonna pull tight. So I just created my first little chain. Now I'm gonna bring my needle back down through the fabric and I'm gonna go back down on the inside of that loop. So I'm going down through the same hole that I actually just came up through. Pull again, leaving a loop out like this. Come up on the inside of your loop, like so, and then pull tight. And repeat. Go back down through the same hole on the inside of that loop. Pull until you have a little loop out like this. Come up on the inside of that loop and then pull through in the direction that you're trying to stitch. And you're going to repeat that all the way across. I'm going to make one more here. And to end a line of chain stitch, you're just going to make a down stitch on the other side of the loop. So right now, our thread is on the inside of that little chain that we just made, and I want to make a down stitch just on the other side of that thread. Right there. Now I'm going to go back across. And you're going to keep going back and forth across with your chain stitch until you have this whole section filled in. So you're going to keep going back and forth across. So I'm going to go back here, and then I'll go back here, back here. You want to keep your lines going across completely horizontally here. So follow this direction the whole time. So that just means that your lines of chain stitch are going to get a little bit shorter down here. So some of them, like this one right here, might just go from here to here. And then you'll have one that goes from here to here. And then you might just fill in a couple chains right here and then maybe one chain just to get this space filled in. I'll try to pop back on and show you what that looks like too. Okay, so you can see as I get down here, I'm just gonna do a few little chains to keep filling this in. Still working in a horizontal direction though. So right here, I might just be able to fit like 2 little chains across. Kind of work up into that corner there. Make a down stitch. And then I'll just fill in like 1 little chain right here. And if you have any remaining space, you could just fill in 1 more teeny tiny chain if you want to. I'm just gonna make this one go a little bit more like that. Fill in 1 more little chain there. Okay, good. So now you're gonna repeat that for this section right here and this section right here. So you'll work this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, and then this one you're just gonna work horizontally completely. We're gonna add a little something to these 2 sections. Don't worry about stitching over these little tiny trees that we're gonna put in. You're just going to cover them up completely right now, and then I'll show you how to stitch them in after that. So go ahead and get these last 2 sections filled in with chain stitch. Again, we're using 3 strands of 543. Okay, this part can be a little bit tricky, so feel free to skip this step if you want to, but I'm going to show you how to do it. You're going to take just 2 strands of 520, and we're going to try to make some very abstract, simple little kind of pine tree shapes repeating on this section and this section. So I'll show you one down here. I'm going to start towards the left third here because I want to fit 3. So I'm going to fit 1 here, here, and here. So I'll start not all the way at the bottom, but just right about there. And I'm going to make myself a little straight stitch up. So I left just a little bit of space below and a little bit of space above. And then you can just make a few little diagonal lines that work towards that middle line that you just created. So maybe like 3 on each side, if you can. Keeping it super simple here. If you wanted to do a little bit more, if you wanted it to be a little bit fluffier, you could add in some more of these stitches that are angling towards that middle one. Sometimes you just kind of have to play around with where your needle comes up through your chain stitch. Do one more here at the top, all the way to that top point. Okay, so there I've got one little tree, and I'm going to do 2 more, one right here and one right here. And then at the top you'll do the same thing. Create that long line down the middle first, and then make your few little angled stitches out to the side. All right, those are so cute. Okay, we're going to fill in the top part of the stocking with 3 strands of our bright white thread, and we're going to be filling this in with a cluster of 3 wrap French knots. So I will quickly show you how to make a French knot here, but if you want a little bit longer and a more in-depth tutorial, I do have a French knot tutorial on my YouTube channel under the stitch tutorial section. So you want to come up through the fabric, hold your needle horizontally underneath the thread, and wrap that thread around the needle 3 times. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to loosen this up so that I can angle my needle back down, and I want to push my needle down right next to where I came up through the fabric. Now I'm going to pull it with my non-stitching hand. I'm going to pull that knot tight so that I don't lose that knot as I begin to push my needle straight down through the knot that I've made. And then finally I can let go, and I made a little knot. If you wanted these to be not quite so chunky, you could do 1 or 2 wrap French knots, but I like the fluffy, chunky look here at the top of this stocking. And you can work in really whatever direction you want. You just need to get this whole space filled in with your French knots. So this is a good place to practice French knots. We've done a fair amount of different types of stitches in this one little ornament. So it's kind of a nice little sample of different stitches to work on here. And I'll check back in with you once we get that all filled in. Okay, grab 6 strands of 8/16 one more time and just do a simple back stitch for the line that separates above right here and then below right here, just so we have a little bit more definition within there. And you're just going to kind of work right in between where your 2 stitches meet, so where our chain stitch meets and where our satin stitch meets. I'm just going to keep this one as a simple back stitch. We're not going to do whipped back stitch here. But I like the pop of red that it gives us. So get that done, and then we just have one more thing to do. Okay, I originally had the ends of these strings hanging off as tassels, but then I thought it would be so cute if it was some little jingle bells and stars instead, so that's what we're gonna do. So I have a little beading needle here, which is the one with the tiny eye, and I have one strand of 3773. And we're gonna do a jingle bell over here on the farthest to the left. So you can come up just where that string ends, and I will do this. There's two jingle bells. So one is this more like antique brass looking one. So run your needle through there, and then you just want to make a down stitch like right next to where you came up to help anchor that jingle bell into place. You can sort of push it so that it stays right where you want to. And if you want to add one more little stitch to help anchor this into place, I'm just going to come up right next to it and go back down through the hole at the top of the jingle bell. And then on this one and this one, I'm going to add the stars. So I'm going to come up through the fabric right below, and I'm going to go through the hole of the star. And then kind of push the star where you want it to rest on the fabric. Push it back with your needle a little bit so that it rests nice and flat and flush against the end of the string. And then just make a down stitch right on the opposite side, right where you can see that it lands. We're going to do the other jingle bell right here. So this one, there's a little hole at the top too, so just push it through that hole. And again, just make a down stitch right next to where you came up through the fabric. And that will anchor that into place. And then you're going to add your last star right here. Okay, we are all done stitching. So now you're going to wash away the rest of the stabilizer paper, and you're just going to take your hoop to your sink, run hot water, and then let that water dissolve away the remaining stabilizer paper. Once you see that it's all gone, you're just going to let this dry completely, and then I will walk you through all the steps on how to turn this into a cute little ornament. All right, I've got 4 ornaments this year, and the backing process is the same for all of them. So I'm going to show you with my little cottage from the movie The Holiday for all 4 different ornaments this year, because the steps are going to be the same even if the actual pattern is different. So the first thing you're going to do once your hoop is all dry, if you used stick and stitch paper, is you're going to unscrew it and separate this out again and take it apart. Then you're going to lay that inner ring back down on a flat surface and take your pattern piece of backing fabric and place it with the pattern side facing down over that hoop. And then you're going to relay your stitched on fabric on top of that. It should be pretty warped from having been in the hoop so long, so you should be able to kind of press around and see that it's lined up around that inner hoop. Then you're going to loosen this up maybe a little bit more just because we're adding an extra layer of fabric in here, and sandwich it down again. If it's not lined up perfectly, you can always take it off and reline everything up. Go ahead and tighten it all the way and get it looking exactly how you're going to want it to look displayed. If you need to pull anything on the sides, you can. Usually it's going to be pretty tight already. This is looking pretty good. Next, you're going to take a pair of scissors and you're going to cut away all of the excess fabric, and you want to get as close to that back seam as possible. Again, this is just my method for backing hoops. There's lots of different methods for backing hoops, so you can do it any way that you want to. But I love the really finished look this gives the backs. So I went all the way around. I'm just going to cut off a little bit more of these pieces that are sticking super straight up. Okay, so it should look something like this. Now you're going to need some hot glue or some strong glue and your little piece of twine. And you're going to work little sections around the side here, lay some glue down, and then lay your rope on top and press it down so that it covers that back seam. Work your way all the way around. As you get close to the edge there, you can kind of see where it's going to meet up, and go ahead and just cut off any of that excess before you glue down that last little piece. Okay, so now we have a super cute finished back of our little hoop ornament, and now we're going to add something to hang it with. Okay, so to get the chiffon ribbon here, you can use like the tip of a pen or the tip of scissors to help push it through, because I know that's kind of a small space. So just use something you can help push it through underneath the screw. And then you're just going to, however long you want it to be, tie a little knot right there at the top. So I just crossed it over once, and then I'm going to tie a little knot right on top of that. And then pull it tight, and I'll just cut off a little bit of that excess there. And voila, our ornament is ready to go. If you did one of the ones that has the tinsel with it, one of my other two ornaments that has the tinsel ribbon with it as well, you would just stick it through at the same time as the chiffon ribbon and go ahead and tie off just as you would with this one.